It's so funny because, I mean, when you think about it, so often, the more creative you are, the more sometimes people in the same circles may think you're trying to be competitive. And it's like, no, 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 no. No, I'm not interested in competing against anyone but myself. And even then, I'm not even interested in competing with myself. I'm interested in bettering myself.
Hey, welcome to the Monique on the Mic podcast. I'm your host, Monique B. Thomas, and this episode 007 or 007 is the first episode of the year 2024, and it couldn't happen at a better time, as my first guest, like James Bond, is a unique blend of determination, intelligence, and skill. He has been a vocal consultant for tours by Celine Dion, Solange Knowles, and Britney Spears, to name a few. As a pedagogue, he's trained singers and teachers all over the world, many of which train top-selling artists. He's a personal friend and a mentor and is highly responsible for the way I teach and the way I sing, and probably the way I eat. Everybody, please welcome to the show, Greg Enriquez. Hey, Greg. Thanks for being here.
Hey. Thank you for inviting me. I almost didn't show up because there was no food involved.
I'll send you something because you know how we share a love for food as well as we do share a love for all things vocal. Maybe not all things, but a lot of things vocal, Most things
yes.
vocal. Well, but the truth is, I think that, this is interesting because Natalie Dessay said something. I read it somewhere that she said something like she doesn't trust people who don't like food. And I can get down with that. I can get down with that because loving food is something it's very carnal. It's very animalistic. It's very roots.
Well, I mean, yeah. And I know for me, I'm a very sensual person. Mm-hmm. So, if it's something visual, it catches me. If it's something, oral, it catches me. I'm Epicurean, so something in terms of the, food taste. Yeah, I'm all about it. So yeah, anything like that would certainly have my attention.
Oh, so sensual meaning the senses, not meaning sensual sexual, but sensual.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I had to when you.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay. All right. But they're tight.
You didn't have to. You don't have to bleep this.
No. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But that love for food definitely goes hand in hand with the love for voices. I noticed something I didn't just notice it because obviously I've known you for so long and we've been working together. I've had the pleasure of working with you since 2009. And I noticed something on your website is that you have written vocal consultant. And I wanted to talk about that because I know that everything you do is deliberate. You do nothing, that's haphazard. Everything is very, very chosen and deliberate. And so I want to know why you don't have voice teacher or vocal coach on your website.
Well, strangely, you caught me in transition because I am actually going to change it to singing consultant.
Okay.
And singing consultation. Mostly because of the fact that, as we evolve, whether it's, an evolution of our skills or our tastes or, just what we can do within the marketplace or what we feel comfortable doing. I find that a consultation is really the broadest way of describing what I do. And then, like I said, I'm going to narrow it down to singing because, as I keep analyzing everything that I'm interested in doing is not just, an isolation of vocalism.
Right.
Everything that I'm interested in has to do with singing.
Oh, so now, I'm going to have you go further with that and make the big distinction between vocalism and singing.
Well, singing is directly related to the art form or an art form. It's not just, the sheer mechanics of doing something, the sheer, lack of a better way of saying it, just an unusable vocalism, even though some people would say, well, everything is usable. For what interests me, I'm interested in things that have to do with singing, with the art of singing.
Right. That makes sense. And I love how you said what interests me, because then it comes down to the taste that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. We're back to food.
Well, always, I don't think we've ever had a conversation that didn't involve food. I would have to say that I am also a sensual person in the same way. There's that, if I smell something, if I really like it, I'm like, wow. And if I really don't like it, I'm like really turned away from it,
Oh,
So,
yeah, totally. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's a really good thing, because I know that, majority of my friends, I trust them with music. I trust them with food. I trust them with movies, so I don't have any really close friends that, if they're having a dinner party or something, I'm going to be like, oh God, I better order takeout.
so why is
You
that?
know?
Is it that you need to share a love for senses or an understanding of senses with the people that are closest to you?
You know what? I've never actually thought about it in terms of why it is that, but I think it may be sort of pruning.
Okay.
It may be self-selection. It may be just, that as things go on, because we've known each other, in this industry, knowing somebody, and remaining friends
Yeah,
for
and
as long
continue
as
to
we
like
have.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be really challenging, because there's so many external forces, that, people that are not necessarily in this industry, they may not realize, very much the teaching of singing is much like religion. There are lines that can be
Ooh.
drawn.
Yeah, and there's been all-out wars over what people
Yeah. Oh,
believe.
yeah.
Well, I'm definitely glad I made the
Yeah.
cut. I'm glad I made the cut from your
I was going to
pruning.
say, I don't know. I was going to say, I don't know if it was that or I did. I don't know if I made the cut with you also, because it goes both ways,
Yeah.
just like any relationship.
Well, we often talk about what's normal, and I refer to this simply because as I was preparing for this interview, I was looking into our emails, our first emails back in 2009. Wait. I'm going to actually go back and read something from it. And you basically say, I had tried to send you a text message after our first group of lessons, because it was during a training session. I think it was like probably 5 to 7 days. And it didn't work. So I resent it as an email. And then here's your response. Monique, thanks for resending. I'm so glad to have met you. What a wonderful voice, person, teacher, you. Yes, normal is an elusive term, isn't it? Lol. By the way, blah, 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 blah. And then you use normal again. But I love the fact that you talk about normal being elusive. But what I've found with you and the other people that make the cut is that amongst us, there is a sort of normalcy that allows me to be me. And because that allows to be me, it allows to me, I can't talk. It allows me to be the best version of myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I think that's, I think that's really, I don't know if it's by design, because, there's so many things that just happen to us. And then, as we go along, we accept more or less of things, sometimes knowingly and sometimes unknowingly. But yeah, I think in that regard, I think it's so important for everybody around you, whether it's your professional life or your personal life. And I'll get into that a little bit later, whether or not in those two arenas, I think it's really important to allow people to be who they are. Now, like I said, I was going to get back to that. So now I'll get back to it real quick.
okay.
For me, I'm now at the point where I really only want to work with people that I like. And, now that sounds, that could be taken many different ways, but the reality is, most people I'm working with or working for, they're friends. And I really like that. Really, really like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because in some other arenas, they say, don't mix business and pleasure, or, don't work with your friends. And, but I can completely agree with you because we're dealing with an art form. We're dealing with, lots of feelings and emotions and our senses. It's hard to create art with somebody that you don't like. If you
Yeah,
just
totally.
sometimes the sight of somebody, you just kind of want to, now don't condone violence, but sometimes you want to punch somebody in the eye. Again, I don't condone violence, but sometimes you want to strongly. How do how do you work with them? But I'm sure that in your career, you've had to work with people that you didn't particularly care for. How did you deal with that? Because you're so professional.
But you know what, though? I think, first of all, we've all had to do that, but at this point, for me, it's just really, really positioning myself in a way that everybody that I'm working with, either it works or it doesn't work. And then if it doesn't work, there's no hard feelings. It's like, no, you just go about your business. I'll go about mine. But that's just how it goes. And I think that makes it, for me personally, that makes it a lot easier. Makes it much, much easier, because then, all I have to do is just focus in on what it is that I'm doing, which typically, as is I've put myself into just specializing into singing technique, and so that just makes it very easy for me.
Right,
I don't ever have to get in discussions with anybody about, like, well, what do you do exactly?
Right,
it becomes really obvious.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
but to your point, I think it starts with, it's really clear to me first.
Yes.
And then I carry that attitude moving forward. And so there isn't any sort of question about what I'm trying to do or where I'm trying to go with this.
Right. So how long have you been that way? Or, you've had a very long career. How long have you had that kind of clarity about, who you want to work with and who you don't want to work with?
I think from the very beginning. And then, as circumstances have played out in life, it's made it easier to exercise or remain in that realm as life has unfolded, and circles that you run in work or don't work. Again, I think it's planting the seed. I think it's planting the seed, and then the plan and the design comes from your mental direction.
I think, though, that you're some kind of a rare bird in the sense that I feel like a lot of people learn that lesson a lot later in life. I know me personally, it's probably just been in the last few years. I'm starting to, how I know that I'm not going to be able to work with somebody is I listen to literally my gut. When somebody comes to me with a proposition, I immediately feel in my gut, like I start to get a knot if it's not going to work. And then I can.
And what do you?
Yeah.
If you were to put a percentage on that, how often do you get an upset stomach over it?
I wouldn't say an upset stomach. It's just, there's like a closing in my stomach. I've understood that that's a no, that my body's telling me no. I don't get sick about it, but my body's like, starts to tighten, especially my stomach. I guess it's a food thing. Like, but my stomach starts to tighten and it's like, nah, for whatever reason, this is not for me. And then I know if I sit down and go through the different things, it'll be something like, I don't like the financial conditions. I don't like the way this person came at me. I don't like the music, or I don't like the people involved, or whatever, but it's going to be a no.
For you personally, if you were to put a percentage on that kind of reaction, how often do you get a reaction, or can you even measure it?
I think I always get a reaction. I think the difference is I pay attention to it now. I think there's always a reaction.
But I mean, a negative reaction. Let me say it that way. How often do you get a negative reaction?
I would say probably 75% of the time, because the truth is, I'm not supposed to accept everything that comes my way. There's only going to be a handful of things that fit me, Monique Thomas. Not only there's, Monique Thomas vocally. There's what I can do vocally, artistically. There's also Monique Thomas, the human being, like how much of a game player am I going to be at this? How much of me am I going to be able to bring into this project? Are there parts of me that I'm going to have to tuck away? And if I have to tuck too much of myself away, I don't want to be involved in that project because I don't feel like I can breathe, literally. And I'm that sensitive. So I think probably when I really think about it, it might even be 85%, to be honest with you. I think as I get older, it's fewer and fewer projects, but that have a bigger sense to me.
On those projects, the projects that you say no to, the projects that you turn away and say no to, how many of them occur or happen again somewhere later in your life?
Do you mean those same projects come back to me, or I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, how many of them
come back
to you?
I don't think any of them. None of them.
Yeah, and then your life just goes on.
Yeah. Yep.
That's kind of your answer. Your answer is my answer.
Yeah.
Because there's just, there's no reason to fight over something.
But this is such a big thing for artists, because there's such this scarcity mindset of, if I don't get that audition, I don't get that part, I don't, whatever it is, there's a multitude of things that, we're trying to get. It could be a promotion, or it could, whatever. We feel like it's the end of the world at that time, often.
Well, and it's often, when an artist is, having to pay their bills.
Yeah.
And I think that's, that if we were to take away, the financial burden that most artists have to face.
That would be great. Yes, take them away, please.
Yeah, then everything else is just sort of easy breezy, and I think that's, what happens with age is that, I can't speak for you because you don't look any older since I ever met you. But I certainly do. And I know for me, as I've gotten older, I don't have to worry about the other stuff as much because there's a financial security.
Yeah.
From years and years of just, and I think that's sort of important, but I think the key to that financial stability also is, this is almost a circular answer, because the key to it is also knowing yourself and saying, what hell am I willing to put myself through to get, sort of like Mario Brothers, what hell am I going to go through for this level to get to the next level,
Right. Yeah. Assuming that we're all going to go through some type of hell, it's better to be able to choose it at least,
Yeah. And, and it may be hell is too strong of a word, maybe gauntlet. we got some sort of gauntlet. We've got to, at least we can make it sound more like a game rather than, rather make it more like a game rather than just sounding like, life or death.
Yeah. But I mean, it's all in good fun, but definitely, with age, that process has gotten easier and less painful for me. Different setbacks that I had, I had that interview a month ago that was really important to me. And they didn't accept me because my price was too high. And, my immediate reaction was like, oh man, because, I was thinking this was going to be something very interesting. And you know what? I reasoned it by just saying, my price is too high. My price is too high. That means they weren't wanting me. They were wanting a cheaper version of somebody they think does what I do, or something in that ballpark.
Right.
But it wasn't exactly Monique B. Thomas. And I realized, you know what? I don't want to work with people that don't value Monique B. Thomas with the unique skill set that I bring to the table. And that may sound very boisterous, but the truth is we're all very unique with what we bring to the table. If I'm just one of many and, you're not actually wanting me, I actually don't want you either.
Oh, no, totally,
that's the
totally.
conclusion that I've come to at this point.
And it also can be, I know that we're not trying to rationalize all of our, weird thoughts, but, it also could be that it's not so much that they don't want to pay the price. It could also be that they can't pay the price. And so it's an immediate no when it potentially could be a yes later.
Yeah. But what I've learned is that, that's, I don't get into that part.
You have no control over either.
I don't have any control over it.
You don't have control over either.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is kind of like, all right, no, all right, next, let's move on to the next thing. And lo and behold, there's always just new opportunities. As long as you're putting yourself out there, I do believe in the law of averages. If you're putting yourself out there and you're putting out good quality work, which is what I always try to do, I think it's inevitable that you're going to get different opportunities that come your way. So I've really learned to stop worrying.
I would agree with you completely. And I think that, depending on the listener to this particular conversation, again, it just comes back, know yourself, and, whatever circumstance you're going to find yourself in, know what that is, It's so funny because, when you think about it, so often, the more creative you are, the more sometimes people in the same circles may think you're trying to be competitive. And it's like, no, I'm not interested in competing against anyone but myself. Yeah. And even then, I'm not even interested in competing with myself. I'm interested in bettering myself.
Yeah.
And so it's, competition can be such a misused word, and to the point where it's not just misused, but it's abused. And I think that's where we as teaching artists have to be, teachers of artists as well as artists that teach. Yeah. I think that's where we have to be careful, because the moment you monetize anything, it seems to allow people to take on that phrase, it's nothing personal, it's just business. And that's such an interesting thing, because really everything that I do is personal.
So, how do you? Yeah.
It's not like all of a sudden I'm going to be like, okay, now we're doing business, so I can be quote unquote cutthroat, or I can be an a-hole to you.
Right.
No. That never crossed my mind.
No. I want to change subjects for a second here. I want to talk. You have extensively trained students of singing all over the world, so singers, and also trained voice teachers all over the world. So you're getting to see people from sort of different angles, right? I want to know, what makes a good student? And I'm going to add to that. I don't even think it sounds like a weird question. What also makes a good artist? So what are your thoughts on that?
I would say trust for both. Now, when I say trust, I am meaning the words associated with trust, like truth. I think trust in, as an artist, you have to trust yourself, but you also have to make sure that you are staying to your truth, even if it is not in vogue or not understood, or completely you're alone in this one and you're the minority. And I think it's the same thing with teaching. I think, what makes a great student, what makes a great artist is trust, truth. And I think it's the same thing with the teacher. I really don't see many delineations between student, teacher, artist. I really just see them as one entity. And so I would say trust is the word.
I really like that because I was, coming to the thought that, for example, artists make strong decisions and tend to have a very clear vision about what they want. And sometimes these clear vision people come into our studios and they have this idea about what they want their voice to do, but what their voice needs to do mechanically might be different. How do you deal with that?
Well, I mean, I first try and satisfy the mechanical and just sort of let them know, if we take care of this initially, there may be parts of the picture that you didn't see in your vision. And you might be able to start seeing because we've, broadened the scope of the lens, Right. But to me, it is, in service of the art. Right. Now this is tricky. This is really tricky because it's not just in service of the artist, but in service of the art. Because we don't want the artist to just die after they've created something or they're trying to perform something. We don't want them to just, die in the process. So we have to think about the art and say, look, how do you carry on? And so there is that balance of, having healthy, reusable skills, but then also having immediate usable skills for what the artist is, feeling at that moment. Now, I know that, we run the risk that this kind of conversation can be just so philosophic that it just runs in circles and doesn't really do anything. That's why it always does come back down to skills. What skills do you feel like you're needing, and what skills, are you, what ones maybe we cannot articulate clearly are the ones that you're needing right now.
Okay. So do you ever get any pushback from these artists?
All the time.
Yeah.
I get fired every day. And in a lot of ways that doesn't bother me. Not because I'm just, being cavalier about it, but it's just, the type of attitude that one has taking a gig has got to be the same attitude they have while they're in it. If I'm willing to say you're not for me at 7 a.m., I've got to be willing to say you're not for me at 1 p.m. on the same day. And so it's like, if I'm willing to do the work with you and vice versa, I've got to be willing to say, okay, well, our paths have crossed. And that's fine.
So when you say you get fired every day, you mean like a student will come in and they'll have the lesson and they won't come back?
Oh, sure. Or I'll be on a project and be fired right in the middle of a project. Yeah. Firing is just as diverse as hiring.
Yes, that's true.
We've all had some interesting gigs. Well, we've all been fired from interesting gigs.
Right. So you said something about sustainable singing, and I want to get into, we're going to piss a couple people off territory. Do you mind?
No, because I know that if anything gets too awry, we can always edit.
We can always edit it out, right? But I pride myself,
and bleep.
We can bleep. Yeah, that's gonna be a lot of bleeps. I pride myself on not doing too much editing, even when I fumble over the words, because I like authenticity as much as possible. So the subject du jour, the thing that I think will piss some people off, is I want to talk about belting. This is a term we're hearing. You know how the internet is. There's a buzzword, and everybody picks it up for their marketing because it's what's trending, and it gets used and abused and twisted into. Let's just talk about it.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think the problem that we run into with, in general with any terminology is, where does it fit into the big picture of the immediacy of the art? When people say they want to belt vocally, depending on what they're talking about, it's like, okay, I understand belt in some ways can be just a loud, intense high note. But if you can't do anything with it, if you can't act within it, if you can't be musical within it, meaning that any note that you do loud and intense, if you do not have the ability to change the dynamic within what you're doing, then that, to me, that may be a limited approach. But also, going back to that thing that I just mentioned about acting, it's very interesting. I've never heard anybody say, I want to learn how to belt act. Never heard it. I've heard people say, well, I want to learn how to belt this when I'm singing. But then what's the acting like when you get into that belt? What is there going to be a belt acting technique? Do we see dancers belt dance? So I think that's where we have to be careful, I think, in terms of the art form, is that, one thing takes such a precedence over the integration of everything else that it all of a sudden just stands out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
At least to my senses.
Whenever a student comes in, and of course it's been more frequent in the last few years, and they say, can you teach me to belt? I'm like, okay, let me think about how I'm going to deal with this. I mean, I know how I'm going to deal with it mechanically, but explaining it, because to me, when I hear the word belt, I get the impression that the person who's asking for it is simply just asking for loud and high. Now, loud and high are
right
only parts of the equation for me as a singer. We do need to sing loud and high at times, for reasons, but that's not all we need to do. But also, I have to take into consideration intonation. And usually I find from what I've heard, and, correct me if I'm wrong, most of the times I hear what people are going to consider to be a true belt. It's usually very yelly, devoid of the qualities that I want to hear in a voice. And it's often slightly under pitch. And so I'm thinking, well, if that's what people are looking for, that seems a little, it seems sloppy.
Well, now, this is, I understand why you prefaced this conversation by saying, we get into the territory of possibly pissing off people. But I would say, think of the poor background singers. How do you harmonize on somebody who's belting? Because all of a sudden, there's a lack of a harmonic stack on most of the time that people are belting, that to try and harmonize just purely on the pitch just simply isn't enough. So but I think that's why it's like, I think the conversation is best when we talk about it as it applies to an art form. This, the last 10, 20 years, and possibly the continuing 10, 20 years, it could be the time where there are musicals, songs, singers that all they're known for is belting, and we don't know what the next thing is going to be. That's why I think it's so important having a vocal technique and a musical experience in your ability as a singer, having a musical experience that can keep you being in the art form, but not being dated within the art form. Where all of a sudden you hear somebody sing and you go, well, that sounds like something from the 30s and 40s, or you or acting like that, like those old time movies where it's like, now listen here, mister, I'm going to take you out back and I'm going to shoot you, where all of a sudden you go, that's an identifiable period. Right. Yeah. And I think people 100 years from now are going to maybe look at this time frame and say, that was the belt period. And
the belt and riffs and runs period.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's why it's so important for people to, for singers and artists, to be able to lead the curve, not just follow the curve, but lead it, set the curve. Right. And, the more you're able to do with your voice, from a technical aspect, and the more you can do it with musically and certainly performatively, I think you are always going to set the agenda that other people will have to reckon with. Now, when I say reckon with it, it doesn't mean that necessarily that you're the top of whatever you're doing financially or, in terms of influence, but people will recognize there's something there.
Right, right. So, but because we do sometimes have to we actually always have to satisfy what our students are looking for. How do you handle mechanically? Well, I just want you to talk about it because, I study with you regularly still. And I know that you help me to satisfy the sounds that I need to make when I'm singing gospel and I have to sing up there. But I would love for you to explain that to our audience.
I always try and make it where you can feel the choice and that you can knowingly do what you're going to do with your voice for the gig. And what that does, I think, it allows you to say, okay, am I feeling like I'm going to get into some trouble if I keep repeating this, 8 shows a week? Or, in your case, you were doing, a heavy tour, really intensified tour, and still being a mom, still being
a teacher too,
a singing artist, a teaching artist. Yeah. I mean, you still had all those and a content creator, so that being said, I think the most important thing is making choices available for the artist and choices that they can feel that, they can tell when to make those choices or not.
Right. What I've appreciated in the time we've worked together, is because you're so clear. You're clear in, the choices you make in the scales that you give me, the exercises, the way you sequence things. You have built in this possibility to do so many things with my voice that the capacity of my voice matches my imagination, which is
exactly.
That is, the most freedom that any artist can ask for, because there's nothing more frustrating than hearing something in your mind's ear and not being able to get to it. Now, obviously, we all have to deal with instrumental limitations, but I tend to think that most of the times people are dealing with technical limitations and not necessarily the limitations of their instrument. And so what I've found is that, you've helped me to build this voice that has access to all parts of my range. And we just continue to even things out so that I can, if somebody asks me to belt in studio, and people do ask me to do that, I transfer that into, okay, I've got to do a strong mix. Because I'm not going to belt. I'm not, or what people traditionally think of belt. I'm not yelling. I'm not doing that because I work too much. I have this instrument that is constantly being used for professional reasons. I cannot do that. I won't do that. I don't even want, it doesn't feel good.
Well, and also, the other thing is that you're one of the few artists that you're working in a field that, you're able to sing jazz, you're able to sing opera, you're able to sing gospel. And so you have to have all of those available to you. And when you commit to one muscularity over another, it sometimes comes at a price at the other. And so I think that's, again, it's that understanding of saying what is necessary for me to be able to, stay in this game as long as possible.
Yeah. You know what? I hadn't thought of it that way, but I am really kind of greedy in the sense that even though I don't perform opera, every once in a while I might sing an Ave Maria for a wedding or something like that, but I don't perform it. I enjoy keeping my chops there, just for my own personal satisfaction. Plus, every year I get maybe 2 to 3 operatic students that come into the studio. And as a coloratura, I like to be able to demonstrate properly for them. And so, yes, having this technique that allows me to go effortlessly, the only thing I have to keep in check is, stylistically, is this right for the genre? I never have to worry about what my technique needs to do. I just know it's there. And so studying this way has really made a huge difference for me.
Yeah. And the thing is, you bring up, the different demands within the genre. And it's a matter of, recognizing that you don't have to change your technique to go from genre to genre. You just change your musical approach, your mental approach about what you're doing. And in that sense, you can really stay fresh and everything. The only time that you're going to run into issues is when the sound du jour is a sound that pulls you too far away from, your next gig.
Yeah.
And that and again, I know that we run the risk of sounding like this is a private joke or a private conversation that's being captured for podcasts. But that is what it's about, is that, when you have a wild imagination, let's just say, a wild musical singing imagination, you do want to be able to experience what you're hearing and what you're feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. But I love what you said about it's about that next gig. And I think that when people start out, their gigs are so far and few between that doesn't really make sense to them. So it's like, I'm only singing once a month. So if I scream my head off, I've got a whole month to recover. But that's not the thing. Like when you're singing, you're a professional, you're going to be gigging every week to some capacity, and some more than others. I mean, if people are doing musical theater, they're doing 7-8 shows a week. Some places, if you're singing backup, you could be singing 5 days a week. I mean, it can vary, but every week you're singing, it just doesn't feel good to have your voice out of whack, even if it's only like 2%. You can feel it. You get to a point where it's just like, I want my voice to feel perfect all the time. At least to, as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think that is a very important concept and idea that, I do believe that most people chase that concept and idea, but I think we're also in a weird position where, a lot of gigs within the last, I would say almost 10 years have been really weird for most artists. Either they're really huge venues, you know what I mean, where sometimes the vocals are canned, and they're just on stage doing the choreography and lip syncing every once in a while. Not knocking that artist. I mean, that is a valid way to get through the damn tour.
Right.
Completely understand, but then, also we had really the pandemic for 2 years straight, where there are a lot of up and coming artists that have never seen an artist live.
Wow,
and so they're, the only thing that they're really used to is hearing the recorded version of something, and then there's always going to be the side effects, from that. And so I think we're entering an interesting phase where, because of circumstance with pandemic and because of technology, I think there's going to be some great misunderstanding for up and coming artists about, what it is to actually sing a live gig on a tour.
Yeah. That's a very interesting discussion. I feel where a lot of students come in and they think they want one thing, but they don't realize that what they're doing is very far from a professional sound. Very, very far.
Yeah.
Singing on stage, when you're singing through a monitor and you've got bass, drums, guitar, sometimes 2 guitars, synth player, horns, all that going on stage, and you're up there whispering on pitch, that's just not going to cut it. I don't care how pretty it is. Understanding what a true professional sound is and what kind of practice and training is required to develop that and sustain it. Oof.
Yeah. And also, again, the technology in the studio, what they may be hearing can only be pulled off in a studio.
Right.
And so then all of a sudden they try and take it to stage, and it's like, wait a second, that's not going to actually work on stage. Even if you have the best, monitors, if your microphone picks up bleeding sounds from other instruments on stage,
Yep.
you know, or even audience noise, I mean, you know, it's hard to contend with.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like I said, I think we're in a really interesting phase for singers. I think we're coming into a place where, you know, my big recommendation for singers right now is, you know, see as many things live as you can, you know, because you got to make up for lost time because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
You know, so you've got to get your senses, you know, acclimated again to what live performances actually sound like.
Yeah. Oh my. That's definitely going to be a revelation for people, because the other thing is we're also in an age where people are getting their start from a 30-second soundbite on TikTok. So, you know, they're known for being able to sing. They do everything they could possibly do in 30 seconds so that people can like them. And, you know, that could be absolutely outstanding. But that does not guarantee that somebody's going to be able to sing a whole gig or even 5 minutes, you know. Getting used to, you know, singing with a whole band.
Or even if they could, if they're so used to over decorating a song in 30 seconds, I mean, and then you say, okay, now let's do a full gig. They may make it through, but the audience might not.
There's going to be casualties.
Yeah, I mean, it just could be that, oh my God, that's just overkill for every song. You know, this is not an extended TikTok video.
Right.
You know, and so, and I think there is going to be, I think that's the challenge is not only for the audience, but really for the artist, is that, you know, when we start getting into this, you know, getting back into live gigs, and it's kind of hard, you know, because a lot of the venues that survived after the pandemic are of a certain size.
Right.
And so you don't see really, really small venues anymore, you know, not a whole lot. So, you know, you're looking at medium to excessively large venues.
Yeah.
And so that means you're either U2 or Beyonce,
right,
or you're no one.
And the catch-22 is, you know, you have to have some sort of career before building up to that, but there are fewer gigs. Yeah. So it's harder to get your chops, you know, actual performing chops together, because like you said, it's either, you know, huge venues or hardly anything.
Yeah, you're playing in your garage, or you're playing at Wembley.
Right. You know,
very few things in between.
There's very few things in between. So how do you prepare for that? I mean, that is kind of hard, I guess. Time will tell
that's gonna be the challenge.
What kind of artists we're going to come out with in the next 10 to 20 years for that.
I think we're going to see some referencing of the 70s, you know, where they had huge stadiums, but then they also had really, really small clubs. And there was a lot of artists that were being very avant-garde and visual. And I think we're going to see a bit of that again.
Yeah.
Because of necessity.
Yeah. Well,
you know,
because there just isn't much out there, and it's hard, obviously, with, you know, funding always gets cut with the arts first. And I've had a good friend of mine, Martin Schack, who's an incredible jazz pianist in Denmark. He has his own club, and it's tiny. I think, I don't know if 50 people are in there. I don't know if the cops might get called. It's just tiny, but that's the coolest club to play in. Every time I go there, usually we you know, I tour there and I sing there, and it's just such a great place to really be you. You can see everybody's faces. You can really connect with them. And I just feel bad for anybody that doesn't have those kinds of performing opportunities. But, you know, there's so few clubs like that. They're just so few.
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to.
Yeah. And that's, go ahead. I'm sorry. Hey, it's your podcast. Go ahead.
No, I think we have a little bit of a lag, so it makes it a little bit difficult. I said I was going to just wrap things up. I wanted to talk to you about one last thing, because I'm always thinking about the development of an artist, because I'm always concerned about how to help my clients, but also myself, because I'm both. You know, at one time I'm the singer, you know, the artist, and at another time I'm the student. So I'm always concerned with that process. And I've come to the realization that satisfaction is a moving target. You know, where we're like, you know, I'll be so happy with myself when I can do this thing. And by the time you achieve it, you get there, you've already set your sights on something else, which it's kind of sad, because then I think we miss the fact that sometimes we need to celebrate those small wins. You know, we need to pat ourselves on the back and say, hey, you actually did the work to get to that place. Now you're at that place, you've got your sights somewhere else, but a little celebration can go a long way in helping you on this long journey. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think that's a marvelous thought. And I think that's totally accurate. I think it goes hand in hand with, the cultural influence. You know, in the United States, a negative thing for people that are working out, is the plateau effect. You hear a lot of trainers, you know, they always say, you know, the plateau effect. You know, if you plateau, you've got to change your game. You got to, you know, plateauing is a bad thing. And the reality is, no, plateauing is a great thing, because when you plateau, that's the only time you get to master. And if you're moving after accomplishing this skill or something, and you're moving too quickly, yes, you're missing out on the, you know, the attaboys or attagirls, you know, and the self-congratulation. You're missing that. That's true. But you're also missing the opportunity to master that skill that you work so hard to get. But it's so prevalent in a lot of cultures, especially, you know, in the fitness culture, that, you know, the plateau effect is such a bad thing. And it's like, no, take advantage of mastery. Take advantage of you being in a place where you can master something.
So you're saying, you know, we do the work to get to this place, and let's sit and hang here for a second. Let's stay here for a second and just enjoy it and take it in and really have it, you know, almost in our skin before we move on to something else.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, because if you move on too quickly, there may be aspects of that skill that you just gained that you know, but you don't understand. You know, I know your two daughters. You understand them.
They're teenagers.
Very different.
Nobody understand my kids. They're Theoretically, I understand them, but to be honest with you, on a daily basis, I'm like, okay, who are we dealing with today? Especially my oldest, because she's older. She's 15. I'm like, okay, let me see who we're dealing with today.
Well, okay, I should have prefaced it by teenagers excluded.
Yeah.
But that's the nature of this, is that, you know, you can know something, but that doesn't mean you understand it.
Yeah. Listen, you know that I could talk to you all day, and we talk regularly, and
we have.
Yes. And I do have the intention of having you back on this show, because there's so many things we can, and I'm sure we'll talk about, but I would like to know, are there any final thoughts that you have for aspiring artists out there for today?
Yeah, you can't be aspired if you're not inspired.
Ooh.
So get out there, find artists, you know, I have to call on our relationship, Mo, because there are times that you and I are both exchanging singers. You know, have you heard this person? No, let me listen. Oh, okay. Now I'm about all of Lucky Daye's, you know, stuff. You know,
Shout out to Lucky Daye.
Yeah. But I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, you know, you have to, if you're going to be aspiring for something, you really have to find the inspiration from somewhere. And that usually will keep you moving.
Well, you keep me moving. You keep me inspired, because just when I think I know something about my voice, you show me something new. Not even just my voice, but the voice in general. You always show me something new, and I'm very I'll say it's religious, but I'm very blessed for this relationship, because I'm just better for it. I hope you get as much out of it as I get out of it. But on my end, it's like, wow, I just and people might take that as, oh, she's kissing it, whatever. I don't care. But I have to say that having
that's a lot of ass to kiss.
Okay, we're gonna have to believe it. But having, during this artistic journey where there can be so much self-doubt, there can be, you know, competing with the buzzwords, competing with whatever's going on around out there, and you're just not sure if you measure up. It is important to find somebody who has a voice of reason that is constant. You know, you're not contradicting yourself in the way you work with me and the things you say. You have principles and you stand by them. And so that helps me. I mean, I've vastly changed over the years how I approach singers, especially the difficult ones that I work with, because you're so patient and understanding. I mean, you understand that, yeah, we're just all kind of a crazy hot mess inside. And so if we can build that sense of trust, we can actually do some good work together as long as there's no abuse going on, you know?
Yeah, I totally. And I'm gonna attach conversations to two things you said. Okay. Like I said, I want to work with people that I like and I want to work with. And so therefore, I'm a beneficiary of our relationship as well. So that's a given, you know. The other thing I wanted to sort of speak upon was the fact that we're always challenging each other. Every time you and I talk, we're always challenging each other. And it's not challenging just from an intellectual point of view, saying, "Oh, I'm gonna text Mo today, and I'm gonna see if I can, challenge her." It isn't that.
No.
It's the fact that, every day we're faced with not a new problem, but the same problem presented in a new way. Mm-hmm. And so here's the other thing I told you there was two things I was going to attach to. I'm starting to find that being reasonable is being unreasonable.
How so?
The more unreasonable, I'm finding the more unreasonable I am in the current climate, the more reasonable I actually am.
I get that because you're being unreasonable with the unreasonable. Is anybody else going to understand this conversation? I don't know, but there are some things that go against sound, and I mean sound like oral principles, mechanical principles, artistic principles. We can't be reasonable with that. We have to put our foot down at some point. I'm sorry. One last thing. I just remember, the voice forums for voice teachers. And I remember one teacher saying, we've got to be neutral. We can't have an opinion. I'm like, the F we can't. I definitely have an opinion about what great singing is. And actually people pay me for that opinion.
Yeah, totally.
We're getting paid for that. So yeah,
totally.
When people bring to me vocalism, that's, it's just pure. It's an utterance, and it's unintelligible, and quite frankly, very hard to listen to. I can't be reasonable with that. I cannot, and I will not.
And I will leave it at that with you, because that could be a podcast of its own.
We'll definitely get back, and we'll talk about some other problems of the day and issues and of our love of food and our love of art. But I just want to thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to talk to me once again. And I wishing you a happy holiday season, because this will come out around the holidays. And
cool.
You'll get to eat.
Yeah. Eggnog.
You can't eat eggnog.
Want to bet?
Anyway. Happy holidays to you, Greg. Thank you so much for your time, and I will see you.
Okay, see you. Bye.
Bye. Hey, listen, I really hope that you've enjoyed this very first episode of the year, getting some insight from a world-renowned vocal consultant. Hopefully you've gotten some takeaway things, but here's what I'd like you to take away. First of all, in this new year, find yourself a mentor, somebody who is skilled in what you're trying to do, who's honest with you, that allows you to be who you are, and that will tell you the truth when you need to hear it, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. The other thing is, surround yourself with other people and information like this podcast that are going to steer you in the right direction, that are going to remind you of the things you should or could be doing. That is my call of action to you, is just to surround yourself with the right people and the right mindsets. And I think that you'll be on your way to achieving the goals that you're looking to achieve this year. Good luck to you, and Happy New Year. Musically, Monique.